What is partially true, but I believe in so absolutely and take so seriously that I've turned it into a dangerous belief.
It's a good one.
Cole's stock, obviously.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Yo, 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 yo.
That's paradise.
Oof, always good. I mean, that's why they call it paradise.
Man, I want let's get the intern on this. I want to know how many different countries this show has been recorded from. Now, I know you're technically in the good old US of A right now, but smack dab in the middle of the Pacific is not, it feels like another country, right?
That's a true story. What we probably have to do is how many locations?
That'd be really good because we got some Marriott's in the Bay Area, shady hotels in NYC. I had a Arizona trip in there. We got some, you did. All over the place. Can we talk about tipping, man? Tipping, it's hot right now.
There are two things that have now converged based on stuff we've talked about recently. One thing is we discussed tipping, how tipping, people are getting irate about it. People not happy about it here in the US, getting out of control. And then we dropped a few lyrics about Casa Bonita, that famed Colorado restaurant opening back up. And those two things is coming together right now. What we discussed before was that there are these, the POS, point of sale system machines over the last 3 years have started recommending tipping amounts that are aggressive. Maybe that's
in some cases just insane. Yeah. Like not everyone's abusing it, but people certainly are.
Yeah. When typically you might say it's a 10, 15, 20, 15, 20, 25%, something like that is the recommended amount. You can always go above if you want to, but machines have starting at like 20%. Be like, do you want to do 20, 30 or 75%? It's like numbers like that. And so we discussed that. And then we talked about Casa Bonita, the famous restaurant coming back, the creators of South Park reopening. They did a alleged $40 million renovation on that joint, open it back up. One of the things
you don't have to say alleged. This isn't like some white collar crime craze. There's no reason for them to lie about how much money they spent on the restaurant, Doogles.
No, there is, because if they spent $15,000, no one's going to write about it. If you say it's $40 million,
hey, listen, when I visit, I'm gonna validate. I'm gonna ask for their accounting statements. Yeah. Let's see what we got here.
Yeah, exactly. But they came out pre-opening and they told the staff that they're going to move away from a tipping system there and instead integrate tips into their base pay. So where typically, I think the numbers they threw out there were typically someone might make like a $15 an hour plus. I think that's what they told them that they were going to be paying there. It was like 15, which is pretty solid. Instead, they're moving to $30 an hour, no tips. So what you're saying in that world, rounded, you're talking about $60K, a little over $60,000 a year, assuming that you're working your 40 hours per week. That's what they're paying their wait staff. And people are saying, well, what about the upside? Like, how do I get hit with the upside? It's fascinating to me, that point. I want to get your reaction.
So I'm fired up about this, which just means tipping is the new politics and you can't please. Everybody's upset all the time. Basically, is the thing that I like about tipping is you can reward people for doing great work, like in real time. Happens immediately. They bring you your food. They're attentive to your kids. They go the extra mile. They're pleasant to deal with. They help you out.
It's the ultimate spot bonus, right?
Right.
Yeah, there you go.
And taking that away completely feels unfair, and it also feels like the level of service will be hurt. Now, there's got to be some middle ground here.
The thing on the level of service being hurt, because I agree in some establishments with some people, I think that you're absolutely right. Many times, and I love tipping. We talked about this. I enjoy the tipping. Big fan of the tipping system. And most times I'd actually say it doesn't seem like people are working for the tip. Like You know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel like to me there's like going above and beyond for the most part. I mean, and most people, we've discussed this, most people in most lines of business and lines of work are not going above and beyond. You don't have to go above and beyond necessarily in your work. But I don't know if taking away tips are going to decrease service. That's my
okay. Well, I mean, we're gonna have to talk investing here and get Skippy off his soapbox. But like, no, I honestly feel the only job I ever got tips in real time was like pizza delivery guy. And man, I would bring that service. That level of service was top notch, and I was all about that extra tip. Here's what happens in most restaurants, though, Doogles. The waitress ignores you the whole time and then puts a cute little heart and says, like, thank you so much for coming in on your receipt.
Yeah.
To try and bump that up.
It is interesting though that if you go overseas, go to Europe, right, where tipping is not nearly as common. I'll say in some parts of Europe, it's the level of service is much more highly varied. It is not, in my estimation, it is not that it's just worse. It's just more variable. Let me just back up the truck here.
Yeah.
The point was just to say the two things are converging, right? That we talked about. I think it's interesting to say, and it's not a low wage, so to speak, depending on where you live, right? Living wages are different. But for someone in the service industry, saying that if you can get your 40 hours, you're getting a guaranteed 60K a year is pretty interesting. I think like it's an interesting wage.
And this is where Munger's a genius, because Munger always talks about incentives. What this does, Doogles, that's not only takes away the upside, maybe impacts the level of service. It also says the person that works like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday effectively makes the same money as the person that's sacrificing their Friday and Saturday. Typically, the person sacrificing their Friday or Saturday is doing it because they have more tables, so they get more tips. So that system kind of works because you can't go to the concert with your friends on Friday night, but the trade-off is you get more money.
So where you end up going in that world, potentially, depending on how it plays out, is you have differential pay depending on shift, but it still doesn't have to be a tip-based system. I mean, right?
I didn't see that in the article. Is that in there?
No, they didn't. I'm saying where it might end up going, depending on how it ends up playing out. That's what happens a lot of times in customer service jobs, where if someone has to work the late shift or the overnight shift, right? You get a different wage because it's a less preferred shift. So we'll see where this goes. It could be something where you make $30 an hour, generally speaking. If you're working Friday, Saturday, maybe you're making 40, making that up. I don't know. I think it's an interesting experiment to run regardless. We'll see who they end up getting to work there. We'll see how much they make and whether or not it works out over the long term. But that was interesting.
Yeah, it's backwards. I think they're going to backtrack on this for a lot of the reasons we just talked about. Another thing that happens is on a Tuesday night, if no one comes to your restaurant, unfortunately, your servers don't make much money, but you're not out the $30 an hour to pay them. So those Tuesday nights where you take a loss anyway, they're going to take a bigger loss than average. Now, hopefully that comes out in the wash, but I think they're going to backtrack on this. There's middle ground to be had.
We'll see. Stay tuned. You'll get the hot, hard-hitting news on Casa Bonita here on the Skippy and Doogles Talk Investing podcast. We'll keep all updated.
This is basically what the show has become. We've moved on from Kathy Wood to Casa Bonita. All right. The best thing I read this week was really interesting breakdown in Bloomberg titled 100 billion, wealth migration tilts the U.S. economy center of gravity south. The headline is hyperbolic, like slow your roll a little. And this article and all articles try to make these grandiose conclusions about like this is the new thing. Like, no, there's long-term trends that we're seeing play out. Some of it accelerated by COVID. But let me throw some facts your way. And then we'll play off each other for this. So they're trying to brand the South, the new South. What they're really talking about here is, say, Texas, up north to Kentucky, down south to Florida, somewhere in there, that southeast corridor. Although there's plenty of economic development going on in the Arizonas of the world. So, but this article specifically talks about kind of that southeast corridor.
It's the southeast. Right? Yep.
What it does so well is articulate these changes. We're going to talk about Dun & Bradstreet in just a second. But some of these changes, the changes are happening for a variety of reasons. It's like a culmination of factors.
Well, can we back up for a moment? Can I slow
Yeah.
your roll down for a second?
Yeah.
What's important, because we're talking about changes, but then you get with the changes, you get the from and the to. What are we changing from? What are we changing to? And just to set a little context, the reason why, to me, this is fascinating is that the Southeast has, for the past hundo years, right? Let's call it effectively, maybe at least the last 50 years, has been the slower economic growth region of the US. Generally, when you're talking about economic booms, you're talking about the Northeast, you're talking about California, right? That's generally where the economy of the country sits. Now, there's plenty of GDP still that comes from those regions, but from a growth perspective, it's generally been slower. So that's why the change is important here.
Yeah, and the amazing thing that the article doesn't go here, but this is where I'm going. This is why America has so many competitive advantages. So if this was Europe and you had the UK and France and Germany dominate the economic markets for a long time, and then there's a shift to Italy and Spain and others, like that it wouldn't be nearly as seamless. If you look at total tax revenues and government expenditures, basically like government distribution of funds is what I mean. For the longest time, the New Yorks and the Californias have paid significantly more taxes because they've had more economic activity than someplace like Mississippi or Alabama. And so Mississippi or Alabama receives more than they actually pay when you talk about federal government funds. And that's been sometimes not so good for New York, sometimes better for Mississippi. It's a coarse analogy. I think you get it. What's happening now is the growth has moved to these 6 southern states. And for the first time, they're actually creating more economic output than the Northeast corridor. And what that just means...
the influx of capital is wild. Sorry to interrupt you, but the graph just caught my eye sockets. My optical illusions just hit these graphs, and it's wild to see places like Charleston, South Carolina going from effectively $0 in inflows a decade ago to over $4 billion in inflows on this dia. Sorry.
So the states we're talking about here are Florida, Texas, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Tennessee. If you think of any of those states, there's a hot city or two, right?
Yeah.
It's a Charlotte, it's a Nashville. There's lots of places in Florida blowing up. Texas has benefited greatly post-pandemic. Austin's blowing up, but so is the rest of the state, right? These states are major winners post-COVID because of a number of factors. But one of the things is it's affordable to live down there. Yep. So that all the time in everything in life, people examine opportunity costs. And what's happened recently is people got sick of buying a 3-bedroom in California. And this is more about the Northeast versus the Southeast. So let's call it a 3-bedroom near New York City for $1.5 million when you could get something way better in South Carolina, Tennessee, you name it, for a third of the price, right? That's a factor here. Another factor is tax credits. There are people that will tell you that weather is a factor. There's a lot going on here, but it's incredible to see, to get to the numbers, right? They have charts on net flows of adjusted gross income for tax filers since 2012. Call it last decade, right?
Yep.
Miami, Florida, almost 20 billion in net inflows. Dallas, Texas, 6 billion. Charleston, South Carolina, call it 4 billion. Jacksonville, Florida, which is the focus of this article, 2 billion.
Jacksonville. Can we talk about Jacksonville?
Please.
I mean, we discussed at one point when I was at the Dollar General in Jacksonville, a place you do not want to find yourself, okay, is the Dollar General in Jacksonville. That's Jacksonville, Florida. There ain't no $2 billion going into the Dollar General at Jacksonville, at least not the one I experienced. So just thinking about that city, that's a huge change. Huge change. Dollar General was the fanciest place I could find to get my Band-Aids.
Well, okay. So Jacksonville's downtown is deserted, and according to you, has been there recently. Not the nicest city on earth. You know how you get a large company like Dun & Bradstreet to move down?
Taxes.
give them $100 million package of cash and tax incentives.
It's wild. Yeah.
It's a little insane.
Yeah.
The CFO, whose name is Brian Hipsher. I'm not sure if this guy is hip.
Can't be trusted.
cannot be trusted at all. Basically said 100 million was too much. Like, they were based in Short Hills, New Jersey, quality place if you've ever been. But they looked at the numbers. They just ran the numbers on this and said, this is good to
you
go.
Can't afford not to do it.
Yep. On top of that, their average employee, who still is highly educated, University of Florida is nearby. There's good crop of talent down there. Now only makes $77,000, which is much less than they were paying in New Jersey. So, like, win-win-win. This is happening all over the place. It's happening in Atlanta. It's happening in Nashville. It's happening throughout North Carolina. And it's happening in 4 or 5 different spots in Texas. It's fascinating.
It's fascinating. And we don't have to get into the specifics at this point, but the potential impact you end up having on the political landscape is also quite interesting. And they hit on that at one point in this article. High level, regardless of political beliefs or any of that, if you just think about the states that we just discussed, and generally speaking, they're going to be voting Republican. And you have people that are filing in there from California. And I think the question comes up being, and there's a lot of stereotype that sits in there, right? Because even if you say if a state is Republican, that doesn't mean everyone there, even if you're all Republican, believe in the same thing or anything. So it's not about the specific beliefs. It's just like, generally speaking, that's a different demographic system than you have coming from California. And so whether or not this is going to end up being a situation where you have states that start to turn purple, as they say, right? Becoming more Democrat, Republican, or you end up having people from California that are leaving that were already Republican and they just become more red. Who knows what that ends up being? But it's going to be a changing landscape of some sort as we start to go forward. They also
Well, with more political power because the population center
yes, exactly
to the southeast.
Exactly. So whether that political power becomes more one way or gets more mixed, it to be seen, because it depends on who the individuals are that are going. They did talk about this was with Charleston specifically, discussed how a lot of this influx leads to more gentrification and income inequality as well. And so that's a truism. I mean, if you have $4 billion in adjusted gross income that's coming into your city, it's likely going to change the city unless you're living in like Atherton, California, and then you're like, wow, these poor people coming in. You know what I mean? Like, because Atherton's so wealthy.
Yeah. This article is not about a migration of the homeless population, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's about people who make decent wages. I want to fill out we talked about the net growth in gross income for tax filers.
Yes.
In the Southeast. Here's some other states where you see a net decline. New York City, past decade, almost 60 billion.
That is
ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
Right? And I want to define it again because it's an odd term. Net flows of adjusted gross income for tax filers moving from other states. Yeah. Chicago's going on maybe 25 billion. Los Angeles is about 15 billion. And Washington, D.C. is closer to 8. Still, significant movement of incomes and the people that make those incomes typically headed to the Southeast. Where what I mentioned earlier is it's easy to read an article like this and make these broad sweeping conclusions. It's not that simple, right? There's other factors at play here. And I'm not claiming that New York City or Los Angeles is dying. Like, that would be a stupid take. And it's not true. But
and percentages are also helpful. Percentages are helpful in situations like this, right? Which they did not provide. Either way, your point is well taken that you can draw tons of large grandiose statements for things like this, and it's never all that simple. But the general take that the Southeast is experiencing really high growth, especially in comparison to what historically have been the high growth areas like New York, like California, is an interesting trend that we've been seeing for a little bit of time. It seems like it has a little bit of acceleration, or maybe a lot of acceleration over the last 3 years, but has been happening even prior to that. The reversion to the mean, my friend, maybe. It's interesting.
No, that's my whole point. I mean, I think everything in life is reversion to the mean. This is cost of living, taxes, and basically property prices got out of whack in certain places, and this is just the economy adjusting. By the way, you're so right on that percentages. Bloomberg, whoever the intern is that do the research on this, fire that guy already. All right.
Or they ran the percentages and they went, that story is not as good. It's one of those two. Either didn't
it's
run
not
them.
nearly as hyperbolic. Like Musk
exactly.
won't even let us put that on Twitter. So peace out.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll put this on the Substack, guys, and you can check it out for yourself.
I'm going to reach into the fishbowl here, and I'm going to pull out this piece, really simple piece, no prose in this piece, from Collab Fund. Morgan Housel, a few questions is what this is called. And guess what's in the article?
More than a few questions.
Yeah, actually, it's misleading, to be honest. It should have been called a whole buttload of questions.
Yeah.
But it was a few questions. So this piece was all just questions to ask yourself. It's kind of all that it was. There was no context around it, no prose, no takeaways, just a bunch of questions. I specifically found 4 that stood out the most to me. It's not that these are only the 4 important ones or nothing like that. They just stood out the most to me that I wanted to raise here. But I think all the questions are worth looking through for folks. So can I name those 4? Did you want to start somewhere different?
Yeah, we're getting there. This article's so good that I hated every second of it. It's so good that I was like, oh, I have to answer all these questions because they're like incredibly thought-provoking, in some cases profound, and important to know for your core value system. That I was like, I have to schedule a 3-day personal retreat to just like do some internal work, and I don't have time for that. So I hate it.
Yeah. Well, like The Last Action Hero. It was so good that I hated every second.
Or maybe Brett Favre. Maybe I'm taking a darkness retreat. You don't even know.
Wow.
Oh, wait, that's Aaron Rodgers. Wow, that was
you're just
Green Bay quarterback. It's all good.
Nope. Nope. All right. I'm going to hit on the first one that stood out the most to me. Whose life do I admire that is secretly miserable? Mind-blowing.
So if you want to give answers, I can tell you. But basically, I would guess 90% of people that the collective we, admires, has a miserable life. I've always tried to articulate this with the people that get glamorized in our society, and let's say like in business and investing. I mean, for a talking point and only a talking point, let's talk high level about Buffett. Everyone talks about genius, brilliant investor, everything else.
Peanut brittle.
He's sacrificed a lot because he's so passionate about business.
Yeah.
And that might be, like I think there's a lot of things in his life that haven't, and his marriage is the easiest example here, but there's others. Again, not necessarily about Buffett. I just wanted to do a talking point. I think if you do a deep dive into these people that get glamorized, you'll often find it's not quite as glamorous as it appears.
And I'm gonna make it. There's an editor too that you can make to the question. If miserable might be too powerful, I think you could say, whose life do I admire that isn't as good as I actually think it is? Or it could be, and also even with miserable, that person may not think it's miserable, but if you lived their life, it might be miserable to you. I think both of those are important. But the general point, the reason I like this question so much, as you were talking through with the Buffett thing, is that we look outside in other people's lives, and generally you have no idea. If you take this to a micro point on portfolio and not just life, you've mentioned it before, we talked about it here before, you're like, oh man, Simons, I never really know how you pronounce that guy's name. But anyway, Jim Simmons Simons, he just got into name your stock. You're like, you have no idea what percentage of his portfolio that is, what hedges he has, whether or not he even cares about the money. He could have been having coffee with somebody else and been like, dude, this is ridiculous, but I'm going to do it because who cares, right? Like, you never know what someone else has up their sleeve or what their perspective is in something. And I think that's just also true of life. So that's why I love this question. Like, just their life is their life. Your life is your life. It's different contexts. You never know what's going on under the hood. Next question. What do I believe? Oof. And this is like a two-parter, really. The first part. What do I believe is true only because believing it puts me in good standing with my tribe. Tribe being like my people, right? The people I care about here.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in and answer that. Like 90% of everything.
I'm gonna read the question again. What do I believe is true only because believing it puts me in good standing with my tribe? So, what are the beliefs that you hold? Because if you didn't hold them, you couldn't have your crew. You couldn't be a part of your social environment. So, therefore, you keep believing it. That is power. That is power.
If you do research on assimilation and how meaningful it is to basically humans, because we want to be liked, we don't want to stand out from our tribe, our crowd, you'll quickly see that the new kid on the block that wears different clothes 2 months later, hanging out with the new crew, probably wears the same clothes. Like, this is super powerful.
Status and culture. Man. Status and culture. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next belief one. What do I believe? Same beginning, different end. What do I believe the most with the least amount of evidence of it being true? What do I believe the most with the least amount of evidence of it being true?
Probably relates to my weight or my coolness, Doogles. It's kind of a joke, but what's your? This is a hard one.
Yeah, this one reminded me. Let me look this up. Make sure I get this right. This reminded me of there's this book I read recently. It's not a new one, but I just read it recently. That was written by a coach of sorts. That was written by Byron Katie, called Loving What Is. It's a coaching book, effectively. If you enjoy the art of coaching, it's a book that I would recommend reading. What's fascinating, though, is Byron Katie has this series of questions that she asks. She calls it the work. When you're doing the work on yourself, there's a series of questions you ask. And one of them is it true? So someone will come to her and be like, man, my boy Skippy, he hates me so much. He's always blah, blah, blah. And she goes, is it true? And then the person usually has an answer that's like, yeah, it's true. I ain't be coming up in you, right? Anyway, people don't necessarily talk to her like that. But and then her next question, which is powerful, is, can you know that it's true? Boom. Right.
And almost always it's my perception of the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then you unpeel but is your perception of the truth actually right? And hey, maybe sometimes you got there, but maybe other times you're like Nancy Drew with some bad facts, jumping to conclusions because you want it to be true. Exactly.
And you bring that back to the world of investing. You got people like our boy from TikTok Investors a couple years ago that was, I'm primetime investment material. Is it true? Yeah, because I always be buying low, selling high. Yeah. But hold on, you said you're primetime investment material. Can you know that that's true? Yeah, because I've been investing for 7 days. No, so you cannot know that it's true. It's important in this world. That's we're joking about that one, but it's important in this world to get a handle on your psychology. And what are the things that you know? What are the things you believe?
Sorry, on your joke there, even if you've outperformed for 10 years, you can't yet prove that it's true. And I don't want to get crazy with statistics here. You could outperform for 50 years and there'd still be like the 0.00001% chance. But like you flip a coin enough times, someone strikes, 12 straight heads. That's just how probabilities work. And so a lot of this to say that there's no luck involved when we specifically talk about investing, you need a dang long track record to get to the point where you can say it is true.
I got a little bit away from the question there, but it's related. The question's super powerful. What do you believe the most with the least amount of evidence of it being true? Okay. Yeah. The last one. Can I get to the last one?
Yeah.
Is this thing I'm worried about actually a problem? Or am I looking for problems to worry about because they make me feel in control?
Can that be the name of the podcast?
Do you feel that one in your toes? Like, did you feel that one in your toes?
Yeah. I just want to run away to my darkness retreat for 3 days. I don't know how to answer this.
Exactly. These are not questions that you ask like right before you go into a job interview. You know what I mean? Like, these questions
just show up in a cold sweat, man.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not getting that job.
Exactly. This one we talked about recently I don't remember who wrote there was a blog post we were looking at recently that made me, this question reminds me of, where it was about taking action, right? Like people like to take action in their portfolios and investments because it makes them feel better, right? Like doing something feels better than not doing anything. And this question really reminds me of that. It's kind of like the need to feel in control will make you try and grab control. And so then you start creating issues where there are no issues. Just sit back, relax.
It's amazing you covered your 4 favorite. You didn't even get to my top 2. So
Ooh.
First is, and I'm going to answer this, so get ready for a bombshell.
Okay.
What is partially true, but I believe in so absolutely and take so seriously that I've turned it into a dangerous belief.
It's a good one.
Cole's stock, obviously. The current valuation of Cole's stock. That's all there is to it. Maybe Baba's up there too. All right, that was half a joke. I'm not joking on this one. Is there something in my life I think I'm passionate about, in quotes, or focused on, but I'm actually just addicted to?
Yeah, that's it.
Right. So you get to the point
that's
where
a good one.
Passion controls you, and then you go, "Oh, no, I like investing, guys. Like I like investing." No, maybe you just lost control of this, and now you have to come up with an excuse to tell yourself for why this is important. I think a lot of things related to work fit here.
Yeah, I do it because I love it. I do it because I love it. I mean, watch that line because it is a thin line. I think jokingly, you probably were serious, but I'm taking the joke because it makes me feel better. But jokingly, when I check my portfolio more often than it would be advised, and I was saying I do that because I like the data. Like I like being all up in the data. The more data I have, the more comforting it makes me feel. I do believe that there's some truth in that. But something you always would say is you're like, I know that's a story you tell yourself, independent of whether or not it's true. I know that's a story you tell yourself, right? You don't even have to finish after the ellipsis there. Because there's a question where you go, you get an app that's beautiful to look at, like a Robinhood. Yep. And I was bringing that to me. We can bring it to other people though. Is that the reason why? Or is it like short-term endorphins and you're just addicted to like opening that app and seeing whatever you might see, the green, for example, right? Which of those is it? And just make sure make sure I know in this case.
Yeah. Somewhat personal detour here, which is Musk has made all these changes to Twitter. And 5 years ago, Twitter was this incredible place to interact with even the world's most famous investors, right?
Yep.
So this week he's bragging about something along the lines of, this is the highest ever engagement in terms of seconds per user, something along those lines. So it basically meant people are staring at Twitter more than they have ever before on a per user basis. And I'm going, that's a bad thing. Like that's driving me away. That's why I'm not huge on some of the other Instagrams or Snapchats or TikToks, right? Because it feels like this, it's just tricking your brain into maximizing you to stare at the screen. I feel like that's happening to a platform that used to be more of a news-based and like passion-based way to exchange ideas. And it's bad, in my opinion. It's probably not bad for the owner. It's probably not bad for a lot of people. But that's really what this reminds me of, is like, am I actually passionate about this, or am I just trapped in a dopamine cycle because I've been programmed that way?
Yep. And it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive, but there's a line, and it's just good to know where you are relative to that line. Be conscious about it in general. So those are good ones.
I think that's the main takeaway of this question. It's just like, make sure that what you're telling yourself is actually true. It almost goes to the last question you talked about. Like, are you actually passionate about XYZ?
Yep.
Or is it just a lie you're telling yourself? Okay. Right. I'm jumping into the fishbowl. We'll get back to more straight investing talk. Morningstar did a study on the reasons people pick a financial advisor.
Okay.
Pretty simple. I'm not going to read you the 8-page study. I'm going to talk at a very high level about the conclusions.
I have a clarifying question. Question. Is it the reason why people like get a financial advisor in the first place, or after they decided to get one, here's how they select the individual person, like specific person they work with?
The reason they decide to hire help.
Any financial. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right.
Not necessarily deciding between financial advisor A and financial advisor B.
Okay. All right. Cool. Go forward.
Okay. Most common is they want to be more comfortable handling their finances, right? They either don't like it, so they are reaching out for help. They don't feel secure about their decision making, like simple stuff. I think it'd be upset if that wasn't the number one pick. Number two, they have specific goals or needs, right? They want to set up an annuity. They want to learn to start investing. They know that they need to do something for retirement, but they're not sure what. So those sort of things. Those are by far the two most common reasons to pick a financial advisor, representing like about 2/3 of the total survey responses in terms of this is why I selected a financial advisor.
Yep.
Third is behavioral coaching. This is amazing. Like if you're in a camp where you know how irrational the human brain is when dealing with financial decisions and can actually seek out help, you're way ahead of the game.
Recognizing the value and a different perspective in general, I think is a big deal, which I think is a part of that. Right? If you just saying, I might feel, even if you can't pinpoint it, I might feel like there is a bias that I have in my own head right now that I could probably get around. Let me get someone else that knows this that can support me there. It's like that's a hard place to get to.
Yeah, and this is where, for like our listeners that are debating this formally paying for help, I would say it's fine if you feel like you know your stuff and you use Vanguard funds or an app like Wealthfront or something to self-manage, but you need a friend or a parent or an aunt or uncle or somebody in your corner that you can call up when you're freaking out and say, hey, I want to do this. And they can just go, wait, we've worked on this for 20 years. Why would you change your approach now? Like there's so much value in that. Make sure you have a person.
Especially over long periods of time. Like, we've discussed a lot going through different cycles and whatnot. Yeah, it's power.
Last two, which are good, is you're recommended or family or friends. This is basically like your dad saying, listen, get your act together. Go hire this guy. Or you have a pre-existing relationship. Now, I love to think about having a pre-existing relationship or it's just quality of relationship, but it can mean a lot of things. Like if you already have someone you trust who happens to have financial expertise and happens to like know and love and care about your family, like make that hire, guys. I'm not here peddling financial advisors, but like that is a great situation to have. If they're going to do a full 360 view of you and your family's best interest and it's not too expensive, that's a great person to have in your corner.
With what you just what you just stated, it makes me think about the difference between like fee-based or percentage-based effectively, because what you just said reminds me of, I'll call it a project, right? It's saying, can I get a full view of my financials, a look into what might be existing in the world, et cetera? And that's something you pay a flat rate and you can get it, not necessarily need 1% of your portfolio's value, right? As it continues to go up.
Very fair. And we won't even go there on today's episode.
No, but it just made me think about that. Yeah.
I think that's fair.
You could also call the friends and family one intervention. Like the way you, like, I don't know if it's a euphemism. It's like there's a recommendation from friends and family as opposed to they knocked down my door and said, I don't think
the survey went there, but I know what you're saying. And there's got to be some of that, right? Especially, so I think of like your higher wealth families, right? Yeah. In some cases, they might just be like, listen, this is, it's expensive. Yeah, it sucks. You're doing this. It's kind of in this household, we do things this way.
Exactly. Intervention. I got one more thing in the fishbowl. I'm going to reach in, talk about Gen Z and retirement. And this is not a specific to Gen Z thing, I don't believe. Oftentimes, you've said this a whole bunch, when there are surveys and discussions about different generations, it's more just talking about different age groups. And it's not necessarily that it's different for this generation. I found this to be some interesting takeaways on here. And this is a Yahoo Finance piece, which I know you have your own feelings about. But that said, here we go.
Yeah.
Do I ever? Okay. So according to this survey, people in Gen Z believe they're going to retire at 60 on average, and they believe they're going to live to 100 on average. So what this is saying is that they believe they're going to have 40 years of retirement freedom.
Yeah, 40 years to eat Kraft mac and cheese and huddle in a cardboard box.
Because they... Wow.
Sorry, that was aggressive. But like where you're going, Doogles, I know you well enough to know, is like, whoa, you're gonna work for 40 years and then you're gonna magically have income for 40 years, and that's like a no sweat thing. It's a tough equation to pull off.
Yes, and one of the things you could believe by reading those first 2 points is you could be like, okay, so there's an overestimation on the amount of money they're going to be able to make over their lifetime. If that is a belief you have, that is wrong, because they believe that on average they're going to retire and it will be enough with $1.2 million.
Oh yeah, they don't know about net present values, at all. Or yeah, they don't know about inflation.
You went way too complex when you brought up net present values. They don't know how money works and how living works in that world.
Like $1.2 million was awesome to retire on like 15 years ago, and maybe like 25 years ago,
and not for 40 years. It's outrageous.
Don't worry, the government's gonna have their back, right? That's what they think.
No, they don't. They do not. They also don't believe Social Security will be a thing. This kind of comes back to me, and there are a bunch of other stats. So they compare this to other generations. Basically, one of the flows of readiness, or sorry, the perspective on readiness for retirement. The older someone is, the less ready they believe that they are for retirement. So that's effectively it, except millennials kind of throw it off, because millennials are like, we're good. Like the highest of all of the generations, 65% of millennials expect to be financially ready. So other than that, the older you get, the less financially ready you're going to be. But the main takeaway I had, though, from this goes back to what we discussed a few weeks back. We discuss it all the time, but about financial literacy. There's just not enough of a strong understanding on how money works, how the economy works, and how that relates to your own life and use of funds. That's my takeaway here. And it's not clowning on Gen Z. What I said before, this is just the younger generation, right? They're just folks that are earlier in their careers and younger. And we need to get people more ready and more understanding.
Love it. I'm going to take a detour. We're going to get back there. This article this week by my boy Felix Salmon in Axios, simply called "The Case for Printing $2 trillion to Save the Planet," is like the most fascinating thought experiment since our boy James McIntosh. Just insane. So the basic premise of this article is that the richest countries in the world currently all have financial flexibility to print money, and they have been doing that significantly. And COVID's a perfect example. And you can argue that there's more positive benefits than negative benefits. And he says, and that sums of money like that are so meaningful to the world's poorest countries.
Yes.
That they could build infrastructure. Like, so the US could write the check, not even feel it. It's like your rich uncle, hers worth $1 billion, and you're like, dude, I just really need 20K for a car. If I get that car, I can get this job. If I get that job, I can start making 75K a year. Then I can afford the house. Like, my life can be set with this small investment from you that you don't even notice. It's that type of logic. And I don't think he's fully convinced that it would work. But it's such a thought experiment.
Yeah, thought experiment's the right phrase for it. I agree. And we'll put this in the Substack. You should read it through, because it is. I read it and I was like, I don't think I believe this, and it's fascinating.
I don't think it's I think there's way more unintended consequences than he can lay out.
Yeah.
Right. Because there always is. But I'm not sure. I went in very skeptical. I'm not sure that I don't believe it, because the whole rich uncle example I gave, it's just like, that's a thing that happens. There are people with so much money in relative terms that they can make a life-changing investment to others. This is what Bill and Melinda Gates had tried to do with their foundation. It's like, how can I spend $1 where it makes the most significant impact? It's a worthwhile goal,
right.
I think.
That's right.
So check that out. And then, yeah, financial literacy, Gen Z, there's a lot going on there, Doogles, because some of it is financial literacy, some of it is simply age, which is what I always say. But it's like, at whatever, 23, you don't know what you know at 30, and you don't know what you know at 45. And they write songs about this, Doogles. Everyone wants to go back with the knowledge from their older years to their younger years.
They write songs.
Tale of his oldest time. All right. Yeah. So there we go. Speaking of millions of dollars, and better yet, billions of dollars, Databricks bought Mosaic machine learning, Mosaic ML, which has 62 employees, for $1.3 billion. You don't have to do the math. I'll do it for you. Well, I actually didn't do the math. I'm stealing this from online, so I hope this is right. It's about $21 million per employee. So first of all, those employees better, yes, the management team should take a bigger sum, but they better, the lowest of low employees better have a $3 million check on their plate.
It's $21 million per employee.
It's mind-boggling. I mean, I don't know if it's right or wrong. I certainly wouldn't have wrote that check, but I'm paralyzingly conservative. That's so much money.
I want to find so back in the day when Instagram got bought by Facebook at the time, their per employee, it couldn't have been a revenue thing because they didn't really have revenue, I don't think, at all at the time, but the valuation per employee was really high. Let me look this up. Instagram. This was, I think this might be it. No, I'm reading off the first thing that I found, so we'll see if this is right.
But I found 77 million.
Yes, exactly. $77 million in valuation, not in revenue. $77 million per employee at the time.
13 employees, it looks like. So yes, Doogles, you did the confirmation bias thing. You proved all the problems with the human brain. You found the one example where this craziness actually worked. I guarantee there's 999 where people paid this, and it's now at $0.
No, all I'm saying is this one sounds cheap.
There we go. That type of logic from the long trend momentum investor over there.
There you go.
That's a wrap. We got to let Doogles get back to paradise. So, listen, we talked about tipping. I believe our Twitter account at Skippy Doogles has this tip feature. No one's ever tipped us, but if you want to send us 99 cents or 99% of $0, feel free to hit that button. Check it out. We'll test if it works. We love listener mail, skippydoogles@gmail.com. If you could please share the show with a friend, that's hugely helpful to us. And if you haven't reviewed it, please give us a positive review. If you hate the show, feel free to email us and complain. That's great too. Did I miss anything, Doogles?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.